I'm really happy to moderate with three great speakers about modern banking. So if you were there for the panel just before this one, you won't be surprised if I let you the opportunity to ask the first questions to the audience. So you have time to think about it, because I will let them introduce themselves, and then I will ask you if you wish to ask them one question. So please, Oliver, start.
Yes, good afternoon. This is on? Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Oliver Tonkin, CEO of BCB Group. We're a payment infrastructure provider to the crypto asset industry. So we support a lot of the payment flow for the industry in the UK, Europe, and globally.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jeff Schiemann. I'm Chief Information Security Officer for AMINA Bank. We're a Swiss-regulated bank specializing in high-wealth individuals and private banks.
Thank you, and happy to share the panel with you. So are you happy with asking one first question before we enter into ours? Would you like to know about modern banking? Would you be interested in knowing more? Because we only have 30 minutes, so if we want to be efficient, please let us know if you have guidelines and specific questions.
So if I give you my highest level of what I'm worried about, it's scalable and non-scalable attacks by nation-state actors. We're talking NTC Vulcan disclosures last year, some of the major things that have come out in the last year, scattered spider, recent activity, things that peak up through DFIR, so Digital Forensics Incident Response. We're turning that a lot into CTI, so cyber threat intelligence, that then we can deploy quickly in detection as code and response as code in our security operations center. And the reason that's the biggest landscape for us is when we look across what we're doing in smart contracts, we look at smart contracts before we get involved. We're monitoring those actively to see if there's any changes. Liquidity pools, we're trying to scrape data off the dark web for anything that could be there. But when you've got an employee being, possibly, asked to work for Kraken, download some malware to the laptop, right? I mean, chances are that's going to happen, right? And so the IT space for us is very keen. We're also defending against real nation-state actors like APT38, Lazarus. And, Lazarus will take your money whether you're not using MFA or whether you've got everything involved in your IT systems and they have to crack a 0-day, right? So they're making billions off of that. And what we need to do is defend our platform against that well enough that hopefully our defense send them someplace else. We don't mind if they take somebody else's money. We just don't want them taking ours.
So I will answer this because not from a crypto native perspective. It's more in terms of what's going on today with large financial institutions and leveraging digital assets, blockchain technology for, let us say, tokenization of bonds or other initiatives. I think the key risk from my perspective is this the online and offline integration, and particularly the continuity aspects of it. Because we are doing a lot of pilots, and what you do then is, since the construct is pilot, you don't have that pressure of essentially like payment infrastructure. You are under pressure to demonstrate that this particular system is 24/7 and available, but you look at the pilots that we do, they are not stress tested. A payment infrastructure would have been tested, right? So then there's a little bit like off guard, and then you ask yourself, if something goes wrong, how are you actually going to reconcile your books? Because you're not fully online and you're not fully offline either. So I do consider, I think what keeps me awake is essentially, there's so many projects, but if there was to be a failure, let us say, and we can go back to the traditional cyber threat attack vectors, like there is a vulnerability across Ethereum, and then you have so many projects running, and then something goes down. How would you recover from it? Because you haven't actually tested it from a 24/7 perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, it's really a fraud, by which I mean third-party fraud. So we do a lot of process a lot of volume from retail-facing crypto exchanges, and it's probably not wrong to say that fraud is prevalent on some of those platforms on an industrial scale. I would suggest, and it's a bit of a running to standstill situation. A lot of well, good exchanges at least, have invested a lot of money in ID verification, fraud pattern detection software. Unfortunately, the advent of AI, we were talking about this in the room just now, the advent of AI is rapidly rendering some of those platforms obsolete. And some of the really quite credible platforms, I won't name names because that will be unfair, but some of the ones that you would have heard of, you go, oh yeah, they're pretty good, are surprisingly easily fooled by what is actually quite widely available software that's not that expensive to actually buy and set up and run, I say, on an industrial scale. It's a big issue for us. I think it's a big issue for any kind of retail-facing business where there's sort of kind of high volume of payments. There's a particular problem in the UK at the moment because the regulator's about to make PSPs on both sides of the transaction liable for half of the fraud claim, and I say it's an open invitation to those actors to milk banks and PSPs for all they're worth, using, as I say, software that's surprisingly easily available and is very sophisticated.
Yeah, so really big gap in the industry between reactive tools and proactive tools. So there's lots of investigation tools that need a human behind it. I don't need a human behind these tools if I need to go out and scrape data and say, hey, do I have a wallet address showing up in a hacker forum someplace? Right. Do I have something that shouldn't be out there coming back? So yeah, the key question for us is how do we become proactive in the tool reporting? And the best analogy is through IT security operations centers, right? They're collecting lots of logs all the time on how your IT systems react, and if they see a connection, they report it as a high, critical incident. So we have to do a lot more automation in there. Like I said, great investigation tools. Very few of them are proactively reporting in a way that we can take a look at the governance issue between bank operations, Web3 security operations, and compliance, right? Those are three people using the same tool set for different phases in the life cycle, mostly reactive. What we'd like to do is make that a proactive engagement. So that's where I see the biggest gap in the industry right now, is how to take these great investigation tools and make them proactive reporting rather than reactive reporting.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Elliptic and the kind of chain analysis tools. That was what the question was aimed at. I mean, there are some really good tools out there. I saw Crystal. We're here somewhere there. That's a really good tool. I think. That said, I mean, they're good at spotting, I'd say, the shockers, the kind of obvious, the illegal activity, a North Korean wallet or something like that. Very easy at spotting those. I think where it becomes harder is where there's a wallet where there's less information about it, and you can some of the data sets that these guys have got are really good, but they're not perfect. So a lot of the time you'll get a wallet address and it's like no score, nothing to really report. That's where they're less valuable, and I think you have to, those kind of tools at that point become less useful when you're assessing risk of a transaction or a counterparty.
I'll take it like just a little bit a different way. And again, since we are not so much focused on native crypto at the moment, one is how can you tap into the social media signals, particularly in terms of volatility, and then make sure you're probably staying away from the whales or the pump and dump kind of things. So what we are trying to do is, okay, you got the tools, like the name, and being on the client side, I'm not going to take a particular name. So there are a number of tools out there, but then how do you then make sure, one is you have those social media signals as well as to see and connect the dots. So you got essentially on-chain data, you need to have those open source intelligence, you need to have deep and dark web, and you need to have the social media signals, and then you create a clear view actually what's going on in the market. So that's part one. Part two is something that came on the previous panel, is there is not enough case history of all of these, essentially data sources being in a court of law, accepted, and then learning from, what went wrong in each case. So, because if you look at, for example, the other data provider in TradeFi market, they have 30, 40, 50 years of history of running that infrastructure, being accepted in court of law. So I think it's going to be some time, and I would then say I think it just makes sense not to rely on one data provider, have multiple. That's what we do actually. And if you're an intelligence side in any organization, do I rely on just one provider for open source or deep and dark web intelligence? No. It's always good to cross-reference because data could have been manipulated, right? So it just makes sense to have as optimal view as you can. But social media, very important.
And just one example, Sandip mentioned about OSINT layer, open source intelligent. Almost everything we do is open source intelligent in blockchain, right? So why not be pointing some of these great tools? And there are lots of different OSINT providers out there for traditional IT security. And what we did is went to the one that we have and we said, look, this is our use case. We want to stop having our bank operations have to read Twitter 20 times a day, right? So when you see this DAO word come up and these other words come up, injection of maybe Monero into a liquidity pool, hey, alert immediately the bank operations, right? And that's a simple logic app that we can put in place that immediately sends red alerts to the bank op team. And then they're not looking at their phone classically like they have for the last many years at Twitter going and X now going, who's doing what, what's going on, what's the DAO voting today on? So yeah, we're taking the same tools that we've had before in OSINT and we're repointing them now at the total OSINT layer that is blockchain. I mean, everything we do is OSINT out there today in blockchain.
You had some already answers to provide regarding the threats and the opportunities, but if you had to identify the main threats posed by the emerging technologies, but also, not to frighten everyone, the opportunity of leveraging such new technologies, what would be your inputs regarding that? And finally, at the end, is it more an opportunity or a challenge that you have to face in your institutions?
Sure. So AI, artificial intelligence for us, and I'll deal with two images here. One's a circle and one's a triangle. The triangle is what's found in digital forensics incident response in any incident, whether it's ransomware, injection of malware. That becomes some articles that come out of there and become cyber threat intelligence. And then that cyber threat intelligence gets deployable into SOC, security operations centers, detection as code, response as code. We're seeing each of those three elements use AI to accelerate the basic filtering of that information, which is somewhere between 7 and 14 days from initially seeing digital forensics all the way to detectable code, defendable, right? Each little cell pocket there of those three is probably accelerating by 2.5 days now the use of AI. But imagine that whole triangle now accelerating, how long it takes DFIR to turn into CTI, to turn into SOC op. We'd like to see a world where that becomes hours, not days, right? From initially seen to deployable and defendable. And that's our perimeter in that triangle. The other triangle we're seeing is that circle around this triangle, which is not scalable technology to scalable. This is like the Pegasus. This is like the Snowden. This is like NTC Vulcan. Governments really have some activity out there, and that's not scalable across the entire world yet, not hitting the internet yet. But when they start using AI, then that becomes hyper scalable, and then we may lose the edge that we currently have. So those are my two concerns. One's AI is a great power for us inside of that triangle. It's also a great risk for us outside of that if things start moving from scalable, unscalable attacks at the nation state level to highly scalable attacks, then they start to hit us commercially.
I will say this in the context of AI, but how the operating model is going to change, and probably like 2 to 3 years in the banking side. And I'll just to make it easy for the audience, I can use like a plain English examples. In every bank, we will have at least a couple of hundreds of people whose day job is to look into Bloomberg, look into the client's annual reports, look into the credit rating reports, and do credit assessment of clients. It's a big job. And you know what? ChatGPT does that today. So you look at that efficiency on the credit side then, because it's all unstructured data, something that you can feed into ChatGPT can completely automate in next and pilots have already ongoing, by the way. So you're looking at then a complete automation of the back office function. And if you look at, for example, anyone who works in cyber and risk side, our day job can be summarized into look into the new regulations, look into the control libraries, check the evidence, compare against the control, and write a report. And you know what? There is already a chat GPT doing that. I'm already doing POC with one of them, by the way. So then what you have is almost like, and what, we got 1,000, 2,000 people in large organizations working, doing this day job, looking into documents and writing opinions. I don't think from operating model perspective, the industry is prepared to handle it. Because, and I made this comment publicly, is where is HR involved here? Because you're looking at significant skilling and reskilling of people across the stack in terms of what's going to happen as a result of AI's adoption. So I'm very hopeful of a good future, but I don't think all of us, from operating model perspective, like here is how back office function is going to change. Here is how the defenders from a security and risk perspective are going to adopt AI. But what does that mean in terms of when we actually, operationalize it? It's an issue.
I've got a slightly different one, and it's stablecoin usage, which is just exploding right now. In some cases, rapidly supplanting traditional cross-border payments. Massive opportunity, super exciting. You've already got obviously a lot of US dollar stablecoins which are being used, but MiCA's coming into the EU in only a few weeks now, actually, in terms of stablecoins, and it is a big deal, and it's going to become a bigger deal. With that, opportunity does represent risk. I mean, you've got all the risks that people think about with crypto. So it's still the anonymity risk, the AML risk, the getting it wrong risk, the cyber attack risk of bad actors coming in and stealing people's wallets. I mean, all that stuff is not going away with that growth, and it's beholden on. I think increasingly it's going to be TradFi. They're going to have to get their heads around it and scale up, because it is coming, and it's going to be opportunity, but also a huge risk.
So when you say stablecoin, are you referring to the USDCs of the world, or you're also referring to the tokenized deposits?
Both.
Both, yeah.
Both, yeah.
Okay.
And so would you think that to address those risks and those threats, there is a need for more cooperation with specialized actors, with fintechs, more regulation? What would be useful to address everything?
I think you are seeing already that more and more TradFi people are coming into the fintech space. I think obviously we had this sort of explosion of sexy, exciting businesses run by people that were developers and experts in technologists, let's say, and there was some success, but there was also some like massive failures. And I think what you're now seeing as the industry does mature, that there's an increasing migration of people with TradFi backgrounds on the risk side, on the cybersec side, all that good stuff that are coming in, and they're really upskilling the industry. And I think that's probably a good thing for everyone.
In my space, in more the IT security and in this sort of defeating the adversary actors that we know of, I've gone to space after 20 years at France Telecom and working with a lot of CISOs there. The idea is I don't want to buy what the industry is selling, right? What I want to have them do is build what I need. And a lot of times the industry is not doing that. So I place my bets in adversary enumeration, go to companies who do lots of DFIR, digital forensics, look at CTI providers who can malleate what they have into something that I can use. Everybody likes to talk about cyber threat intelligence. It's just threat information until I decide what I do with it is intelligence, yeah? And so I need a really malleable form that I can then apply across the business. There's some basic things that we've done at AMINA Bank that other banks need to start doing, is 100% EDR coverage, so endpoint detection and response. The machine doesn't get an IP address if it's not on, right? And then if it's not on coverage by our security system, it's immediately isolated. And the system looks wrong, feels wrong, it gets isolated immediately. If it's a server, and the question is, well, they can't isolate that server because it's mission critical. where it's redundancy. We're only talking about isolating one of those mission-critical servers. So if the idea is you can't isolate one because there's no redundancy, you actually have another problem you've uncovered, right? So we do some basic things like isolate first and triage second. And I think that's what we need the market to shift to, and that's where we're placing our money, and that's where I put my budget. I just go to the market and say, I need this for this amount. Please build it, please make it, and then we'll deploy it and test it.
So before I get into my opinion on the topic, particularly cyber threats, I'm part of the Europol's Financial Services Advisory Group based in The Hague. I also co-chair European Financial Roundtable's Cyber Experts Group. If you don't know EFR, it's a lobbying group founded by chairmen of all the financial institutions, top 20 in Europe. They asked us to create a Cyber Experts Group 3 years back. And it may be controversial, but what we did 3 years back, we did a very simple exercise. And you all know typo squatting domains. Like, there is a website, bnpparibas.com. Someone can create bnpparibaslondon.com, bnpparibaснewyork.com. So these are the typo squatting phishing domains. We did a very simple exercise of going after the attacker infrastructure based on the analysis of these typo squatting domains for the top 10 European banks. Then once we mapped the attacker infrastructure data in terms of who created this domain, which IP address, where is that infrastructure linked, 80% of the activity was attributed to 5 threat actors. So and that tells us a lot as to if going from reactive to proactive, and one of the conversations, and there is a lot of collaboration going on, and I'm not saying that the Europol or the regulators are not doing anything about it. It has happened. Some of the ransomware groups, their infrastructure has been taken down, but we probably need to do more. The moment such infrastructure comes up, you take it down. That is the only way to deal with it. You have to proactively dismantle the adversary infrastructure. So that's part one. Part two, given the geopolitical construct, and this is a more controversial opinion, where are these attacks coming from? They come from a specific part of the world. And if that is the trajectory for last 3 years or next 2 years, maybe we need a separate internet for the Western world so that we just get done with this nonsense for once and over, because that's the reality. All these bulletproof hosts, all these malicious actors, they're coming from one particular location or funded by those locations. So we really need to see in the context of geopolitical dimensions, and also the fact that there are very limited number of adversaries. They keep changing their infrastructure, but they're the same people who would go after, let us say, from BNP Paribas to AXA to SocGen. These are the same people. So if adversary is so coordinated, then the next question then is, how can we be coordinated? And that's what is happening actually, and at least on threat intelligence and taking corrective actions. I would say in the European segment, at least, the banks are talking to each other and doing a lot of work together.
And just to follow on from that, the threat actors know where we all are. We can't change our address, right? And Lazarus sent 1 Ethereum to BlackRock as a hello. Welcome to the industry, right? Like, they know where you are, right? They know what you have. You tell people you got that much under management, you are just more and more of a target. So, and there's a book called Cyber Persistent Theory, which is about the bad actors ecosystem. And they know and are doing this type of intel on us. So properly, we have to do the same intel back into their ecosystem.
And maybe one question, and I let you, but so we conclude. If we are in a particular political context in Europe with the elections, considering the discussions that we had, would you have some warnings or messages to candidates? Would you have some ideas for Europe to face those challenges in terms of autonomy strategy, cyber resilience, for the plan in terms of the digital decade that is a European one? What would be your messages today?
So I'm dealing a lot with DORA as we're moving into the EU, and I've 20 years at France Telecom helped Work Party 29 on GDPR and was a technical advisor. And they're always behind, right, on what's happening. They're trying to be ahead. They are catching up far better than other countries in regulation. So we're seeing this adoption of EU regulation outside of the EU. I would really say to the leadership who's going to be elected today, I hope they're under 40. I hope they know what a wallet is. I hope they know what Brave does. And if they don't, they need to have a staff who's intelligent about it. And not that there's somebody over 70 and 80, and my accent might give me away who that might be, but the generation in Europe that's coming is far more younger and intelligent about this than the generation in the Americas that could be coming. So I think it's very hopeful for the EU.
I mean, I can't vote anymore in the European elections, sadly. It's, so I've got to look from the outside in. But I mean, I think obviously MiCA's coming in a few weeks of stablecoins, and then it's coming in full at the end of the year. And I think it's great that regime exists. It's certainty, which you don't have, sadly, in the US right now. My worry is that it's already obsolete. And so I think it's your point about people being kind of, you know, the decision makers being of a certain age and a certain outlook. I just to try and be nimble. I mean, I mean, if MiCA's not, or any regulation for that matter, if it's not working, acknowledge it and fix it quickly. And I think if the European Union can do that in whether it's digital assets or any kind of fintech space, they've got a great shot at a successful future.
I'll not comment on the elections part, and then this is purely a personal comment in the context, very very personal. If someone is recording there, what does our adversary, and without taking name of that country, they want to happen in the West? It is in their interest that West continuously stays in a high interest, high inflation environment. When you are in a high interest, high inflation environment, what's going to happen? We will default on our public services obligations. Once you default on your public services obligations with the retirement benefits, pension benefits, NHS in the UK, public opinion, extreme left, extreme right. So what you have actually is a very polarized situation in UK, also in rest of the Europe, and this is again, we are trying to do this from a management education perspective. Where is this all coming from? Where is this polarization coming from? Because it is coming as a result of a lot of things coming together. Cyber attacks, frauds, the geopolitical tensions, but the underlying driver is clear. Do fraud, launch cyber attacks, ransomware attacks, the disinformation campaigns, but it is in the interest of the nation-state actors is that West is divided in extreme left and extreme right, and when that happens, we all see the outcome of what's happening in each country. So, I think the more we are, and the social media disinformation is the biggest issue, I would say, that needs to be tackled really, really well. Otherwise, and I'm coming from India, by the way. It's the same polarization. It's same family members don't talk to each other when it comes to politics. So it's a different story. But it underlying is all the signals that are there for all of us to see. So how can we be coordinated from a geopolitics and social media perspective is the key.
I think we have time for one short question.
So what we're looking at, or what our envisioning is, a security operations center for Web3 that's acting at the speed of what I call speed of threat versus speed of vulnerability. Vulnerability, there are 28,000 software patches from your iPhone all the way to critical vulnerabilities for whatever SaaS system you might have. But the speed of threat is 11 million tactics and procedures by 150 bad actors running 300 to 500 campaigns a month. 11 million vulnerabilities, threat vulnerabilities out there, TTPs. And so the question now becomes, how do we map that intelligent information when it hits us in the Web3 space and the DLT space? What do we do with it when somebody's starting to talk about, I'm going to inject some money into Monero or Tornado or Zcash into a liquidity pool and corrupt maybe what BlackRock is holding, not just in a wallet, but in a shared space like a Aave Arc Pro or something, right? And we need to be thinking about how do we do that, not with people in the loop. 11 minutes, we need to know before the block updates what our risk profile is in a Bitcoin block update.
Yeah, do you think we could do that with, right now?
No, that's the proactivity part we have to build. But we have to get away from these sharper and better investigation tools. And I talk to Chain Analysis and other people when they come into our office. That's great. You got a really sharp investigation tool. I don't need to cut up a dead monkey. I need to stop the monkey from being killed,
So
right?
investing in mempool monitoring? Mempool monitoring.
Yeah. That's so the issue for us is really how do we get across this proactive pool and alerting pool, and we're going to get there. It's just a question of when we get a solution.
Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.